Hi, everyone. I'm Jodi Rudoren, editor-in-chief of The Forward, and it's election day in New York. A lot of people are saying that this local election has the highest stakes of any in a generation. New Yorkers are anxious to recover from COVID. There's a raging debate over how to ensure public safety and equity across the diverse communities. And we at The Forward, thanks to the brilliant Jacob Kornbluh, our senior political correspondent, have been aggressively and creatively covering these elections for the last 6 months. And we're joined today by Jacob as well as by Matt Nosanchuk. Nosanchuk? How do you say your last name, Matt? Nosanchuk, who is the head of the New York Jewish Agenda and with whom we've partnered on doing a survey of the city council candidates. And also we've been talking to him throughout the election process. So I'm going to start by asking both of you. I think both of you went to the polls this morning, saw some voters, talked to some voters. So we'll start with Jacob. I think you went in Brooklyn, or maybe you went to a couple places. Tell us a little bit about what you saw there. Are they overwhelmed with turnout? Are people crowding into the polls? Is there campaigning happening? What are you seeing and hearing?
Well, I'm talking only about the early hours of the day. We still have a long 9 hours to vote. I think that what I saw is the more prime voters, right? The elder voters, the people who usually practice to vote, to cast their ballot before going to work. It was pretty quiet. I mean, this was a wild race, obviously, but it's summer, it's June, it's the first time ranked choice voting. People are frustrated. Some people are undecided. I spoke to one voter who said that he pushed off going to the polls in the morning to the afternoon hours because he's sort of torn between Yang and Adams. And though you can still rank 1 and 2, for him it's important who he ranks 1. And so it's interesting to see the dynamics of how serious people are taking it. But also, this is really a crucial test. Especially, I was covering the Orthodox vote, which usually votes in a block based on rabbinical recommendation. This time it was sort of split between Adams and Yang. So it's very interesting, but also crucial to see, in ranked choice voting, will this voting block, who got a lot of attention from the candidates, actually turn out to vote and prove that they are sort of a voting bloc and a community to reckon with? Or are people sort of tired of politics or not really sort of engaged with, the back and forth of the candidates because they see everything as something more of the same? Even though Yang is sort of this fresh face, he still ran for president. He's still a Democrat, and with the demographics shifting in the community, a Democrat itself is already a name for shame.
We'll get back into the details of how the Orthodox vote and the endorsements broke down. As Jacob alluded to, this has been a very crowded race. There were something like 30 candidates registered in the Democratic primary for mayor. 8 of them have really been considered the top candidates. They have appeared in innumerable forums, including one hosted by New York Jewish Agenda, Matt's group, as well as one that I moderated with the JCC of Manhattan. And Jacob was just talking about Andrew Yang, of course, who ran for president in 2020, and Eric Adams, the Brooklyn Borough president and former police captain. And we have also Scott Stringer, the former Manhattan Borough president and current comptroller, Maya Wiley, who worked for the current mayor, as did Catherine Garcia, Sean Donovan, who worked in the Obama administration, and also Ray McGuire, a businessman, and Diana Morales, who's been a community activist. So those are our kind of top 8 candidates that we mostly talk about. And Jacob, of course, also introduced the concept of ranked choice voting. We'll get back to that in more detail in a second. But for the first time ever, New Yorkers didn't have to pick from the lesser of 2 evils or just focus on their favorite. They got to pick 5 candidates, which is great for democracy and mind-boggling, I think. So, Matt, I know you told me last week that you would have voted early through an absentee ballot, as thousands of New Yorkers are doing, but that you couldn't really decide. So you went this morning and you voted. I wonder what you saw at your polling place and where it was and who you talked to.
Yeah, thanks, Jodi and Jacob, for the opportunity to join you today. This is really exciting. My experience is it's right. I didn't vote absentee or early. I personally like to actually go to the polling place. So in the past, I've either voted early by showing up or going on election day. And I recall for the November election, standing in line outside of Madison Square Garden for almost an hour waiting to early vote. Today, there was no line. There was, a healthy buzz within the polling place, and the number of people were voting, but there was nothing approximating a line. And I think I was among the voters who was, considering my choices until the very end, because it wasn't quite as simple as just going in and voting for one candidate, because we have ranked choice voting. And, it's taken me a while to, understand exactly what the ramifications are of how one ranks on one's ballot. And it's true that you get to, make multiple choices, but it's not necessarily the case that you're, having your cake and eating it too, because we don't know exactly how it is all going to play out. I mean, we know in the mayoral election, at least based on the polling that's been conducted thus far, that no one candidate has enough support to get 50% plus one in a first round. So if you didn't have ranked choice voting, then you'd either have somebody being declared the winner based on winning only a percentage of the vote, which is not, uncommon. I mean, you think about presidential primaries. I mean, the primary winner often has less than 50% of the vote in a given state. But here we now have, ranked choice. So there's going to be these automatic, successive counting of votes, depending upon who's still ranked among the candidates with the most votes.
So something like an estimated 20% of the Democratic primary electorate is said to be Jewish. And there's a lot of different kind of Jews in New York. Jacob, you have been focused a lot on the ways the candidates have tried to appeal to the Orthodox community, and you've written about the historic power of that community in local elections. And of course, Matt, your New York Jewish agenda represents a spectrum of Jews, but the sort of base is really the progressive Jews of Manhattan and Brooklyn, and folks who are more social justice Jews. So we'll start with Jacob. Tell us what you think. The candidates spent a lot of time. Several of the candidates did a lot of things to appeal to Brooklyn's Orthodox communities, right, directly. And there were several different endorsements. So how do you size up the impact of that vote and which candidates seem to be effective?
I think you have to separate it between campaign outreach and sort of succeeding in actually getting the endorsements of most of the voting blocks. Just to go back, Andrew Yang came in to a field of 8 candidates who are mostly politicians, but have no sort of relationships with the community in terms of from the outside. So Eric Adams has been Brooklyn Borough President for quite a while. Scott Stringer has been in politics, most recently as city controller. You have Maya Wiley, Catherine Garcia, who have sort of some relationships because they worked in the de Blasio administration. And Andrew Yang sort of came from the outside, from the presidential race, dove into New York City politics, and he sort of saw a community who is frustrated, who is disappointed by how government treated them. I mean, rightfully so when it comes to sort of in terms of equity, in terms of distribution of financial aid or other things. And when it came to COVID, obviously, my side of the story, which had the community was frustrated and disappointed with the crackdown because of non-compliance. And he sort of gave them a sense of a fresh approach, that he will treat them differently because he sees them from outside as some community who is contributing to the well-being of society. Eric Adams came from the other side. Eric Adams came, you know me. I'm an old friend. Sometimes I talk blunt. Sometimes I'm not there actually on your side, but you know you can always pick up a phone. You know you can always call me. You know I'll always stand with you in times of crisis. And so this sort of clashed at the end where one part of the community said, we want a fresh approach. We want to be counted. We want a seat at the table. Versus another person who said, like me or not, you know me. I've been there. And so right now, what you see is the sort of alliances where community, okay, versus community leadership, who sort of want to have that open door to City Hall, are trying to balance between somebody who's actually reached out to us, who has committed to a fresh new approach, to somebody who knows us, who picks up our phone, who actually has been there when we needed him. And that is sort of where the split is within the community. What I didn't see in recent weeks is that level of excitement. You don't see people excited about the candidates. There's an acknowledgement that, you know, politics is brutal. There's an acknowledgement that government is not necessarily always there for us, but there's also an understanding that we're not necessarily turning a new page, but we have to take what we have right now. And from the candidates that we have right now, a majority of them have actually reached out to the community. As we see in the questionnaire, they're both the Forward sent out and Niger, where you see that the candidates have actually taken similar position on most of the issues that the community cares about. But in the end, those two candidates, Eric Adams and Andrew Yang, actually touched upon something that is more sensitive, and they actually needed this block of votes. Eric Adams needed it to sort of push through and show that he's a front runner, that he represents a diverse coalition. And Andrew Yang, because he has no base, he needed sort of that push to actually bring him to the point where he is right now, where he's sort of considered top tier. Whether it will help him to get to the top, it still remains to be seen. But what he succeeded in is sort of capturing that void of people who wanted that fresh approach.
So, sorry, Matt, I wanted to ask you about, you're let's talk about the non-Orthodox Jews, the liberal Jews, who I think aren't nuts about either Yang or Adams. I think earlier in the race, Scott Stringer, who's Jewish and actively so, and talks openly about making Gracie Mansion, having Shabbat dinners there and things like that, was sort of a favorite of the Manhattan-based kind of liberal Jewish establishment. He had some campaign problems, and I think also, this is a moment where a lot of liberal Manhattanites, liberal white Manhattanites, probably including a lot of Jews, actually are also very interested in being a white candidate. Is probably not, it's not necessarily the moment. So I wonder how you see it from that liberal Jewish lens. What are those constituencies thinking?
Yeah, I think that I think it sort of depends, what age group. And this election has been such a kind of a roller coaster, and it's kind of ending up in a place where the roller coaster is just kind of going straight and there aren't really any hills. It doesn't feel like there's enthusiasm, there's excitement that this campaign kind of came together around candidates trying to meet a moment. It's more like reacting to the latest sort of perceived concern, which is crime. So in the liberal kind of mainstream Jewish community that Niger seeks to represent, certainly, Scott Stringer comes from that community. And my guess is that, the sort of, older, Gen X, the baby boomer, and above demographic of Jews is going to be strong support for him. I think among younger Jews, progressive Jews, Jews who, the Brooklyn hipster Jews, I think many are going to vote for Wiley, and on the progressive end of the spectrum, things we're in such turmoil with, what happened with the allegations about Scott Stringer, what happened with the, Morales's campaign. So it kind of leaves the progressive or left end kind of, it feels to me a little bit scrambling to rally around the candidate.
I think one of the other dynamics I see is that the ranked choice voting system, in which I'll try to do the basic ABCs of it, in which every voter can rank up to 5 choices, and the way the winner will be determined. This is all based on trying to avoid an expensive runoff, basically. So you sort of have the runoff and the first voting at the same time. So everyone can vote for 5 choices. The candidates they just count the first choices of all the voters first, and whoever has the fewest first choice ballots, you then look at those voters' second choices and add those to the other first choices. And you keep eliminating candidates from the bottom and going down those ballots. So that, as I said, it's like empowering in some ways. You don't have to decide who only on one person. You can pick your top 5. But the dynamic that has, I think, really affected the campaign is nobody drops out. There's less. New York has always been a place where there's like aggressive, significant public financing. The fact that this campaign began in the middle of the pandemic meant that campaigning didn't even cost very much. It was about doing all these virtual events. You didn't need much of a staff or a travel budget. And, you had a chance of being someone's third choice and staying in the race. So it seems to me that the momentum that you guys aren't seeing is partly because people have a lot going on, but partly because it's hard there's no focusing of the debate around a few candidates. So, and some of these things that Matt just referred to, Dianne Morales had some internal staff scandals on her campaign staff. Scott Stringer had a complicated accusation of sexual harassment. I feel like some of those things would have made people drop out in the past, but instead everyone's just kind of sticking in it.
Right, the campaigns are kind of, gaming it out and thinking, well, if enough people put my candidate second or third, possible that could get added, and and then they could ultimately eke out some kind of a victory, and we don't know. And I think that's a good point, that that probably serves as a disincentive for candidates to drop out or rally around one candidate.
It's also created this weird dynamic, right? Like, so for example, we haven't really talked much about Catherine Garcia, but she kind of 6 weeks ago or so emerged as like, maybe she's this very solid managerial, not super charismatic presence. And she got a bunch of mainstream newspaper endorsements, including the New York Times. And I think and Andrew Yang said he would put her as number 2. And then they started campaigning. So there's this notion of like maybe being everyone's number 2 is the way to win this election. What do you guys think about that? Is it going to shake out in some weird way like that, or you think Eric Adams is ahead, and even though he doesn't have only has 30%, he'll end up racking it up?
I think it will be top 3, which means most of the people who actually go and take the time to fill out the ballot, they're not going to bother past 3 names unless they come in sort of with, here are my 5 favorites, or my the 3 candidates that I do not want to see get elected. But I don't think that voters are that strategic. They sort of are like, I like Scott Stringer, but I don't necessarily like the stories about him, so I'll rank him 3rd, and then I'll make my top 2 choices. I do not necessarily see voters, and again, it might be informed voters who would take the time. But when you tabulate everything, if you are at 2nd or 3rd place, you still have a chance to actually win this race. If you are at 5th and 4th of some voters, but not most of the voters, you're going to get eliminated pretty quick.
Yeah. I want to go back to this because I read this I thought there was a New York Times piece this morning that purported to be like, here's how to game it out, and it was so complicated that I couldn't follow the game. But Jacob, I think you saw we have a question from someone watching, Zvi, who wants to know, why hasn't Garcia garnered any official support from the Orthodox community? Zvi says, maybe you can tell us more about how Catherine Garcia has helped that community. And I wonder also if she hasn't got any organizational support, do you think she has some underlying support and will be people's second choice?
So there's 2 ways on how to look at that. Okay, organizational support is sort of these large congregations or institutions who represent a large block of votes, they do not necessarily go to who picked up their phone at a time of crisis or when the garbage needed to pick up. They look at the large picture. They look at who's going to invite me to their Jewish Heritage Month celebration, who's going to invite me when there's a really important meeting at City Hall about implementing a new policy. Am I going to be invited to that meeting? Is the mayor or the deputy mayor going to pick up my phone call when I need more funding? And so for them, they look at it twofold. One, who's ahead in the polls, right? If that guy is going to win, I necessarily want to be on their good side. And two, with who do we have a relationship? So yes, Catherine Garcia had a working relationship with leaders of the community, but she's not necessarily known widely within the community, but also mostly for logistics, okay, for picking up the garbage on Passover, for when you need to really get some, go just looking at COVID, which I think is very important, okay, the distribution of kosher meals for those in need. But it didn't necessarily overtake the headlines that this is why Catherine Garcia is the best person that has ever come down to town to the aid of the Jewish community. And I think that is sort of, maybe it's the politics, maybe it's just she's not this charismatic leader. She doesn't have sort of that broad support of union labor and community leaders, that she doesn't come sort of with that bang into the community. But I think also because of ranked choice, that a lot of people are sort of ranking her as second and third choice just because she's somebody who we can reckon with, but also she's expressed some moderate views when it comes to Orthodox issues, and obviously she has sort of a relationship. I don't see that sort of a reason why she should have earned the first choice. Again, everybody could make up their mind, but I'm just looking at how these leaders came to a decision.
But I mean, don't you think that, what role does gender play? I mean, I'm thinking about, the fact that was it Hamodia, had a picture of the candidates, but they, blurred out the faces of the women candidates because they won't print those.
I guess, again, it's an interesting question that I was thinking about yesterday. What if she wins, right? Will she be at the cover of Mishpacha magazine or in Hamodia? And I think that is something that the leaders of these publications will have to decide based on what they were thinking of in 2016 before Donald.
Yeah, they blanked out Hillary, right?
Right. They sort of decided that we'll maybe put a black and white picture, will maybe sort of make a exception, right? Because she's mayor of New York. It's interesting, but I don't think that gender played here a role in what they made the decision about first choice. Obviously, if she had been the front runner from the beginning, if she had sort of that broad support of labor union and politicians, I do think that they would consider that.
I mean, Matt, I want to let's talk about gender and race for a second, because Binyamin, can you put the photos of the candidates back up for a second? Because we do have, it's pretty interesting. We've got 3 women running in the top 8, right? Garcia, Morales, and Wiley. And Michelle Goldberg had an interesting column about the way in which the gender dynamics have been at play. And we've got 5 people of color among the top 8. And I wonder how you feel those dynamics have played out, Matt, in this race.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an aspect of it, right? I mean, to me, it feels like, there are definitely a number of people who feel like it's time to have a mayor of New York City who's a woman, that we need to have that historic first. And some of the things that have happened with, male candidates in this campaign and, more broadly in our politics, just underscore that need even further. But at the same time, there's, concern, in the wake of, or in the ongoing discussion around race in New York City and interactions with law enforcement. But that doesn't play out, with respect to the Black community. But that doesn't play out, in sort of directing people to one candidate. I mean, that really amazing exchange at the debate last week between McGuire and Morales, when it was like, well, who speaks for the Black community? And we don't, there are people who are predicting that the Black community, actually might vote more kind of to the center and support Adams. And then you have this additional dynamic with race and Andrew Yang, being would be the first Asian American mayor, and he's running at a time of increased violence against Asian Americans and hate violence here in New York City. And so those dynamics are definitely in the bloodstream of this campaign, but it's just unclear how they're going to play out when you have this concern that at least is being described as very significant around crime, and then you also have the strong progressive voters who want to see a progressive candidate, and then those who just think this city needs to be managed better, which which is something that Garcia and Stringer and have really been able to capitalize on. Well,
Matt, I'm going to ask you kind of the impossible question for a second, and then we'll see if we have any more questions from the audience. But just I mean, you obviously think about this all day long. Like, so Jacob talked a little bit about the Orthodox community and the key issues there, and the way some of the candidates pandered to them. We talked about how when we surveyed both mayoral candidates and city council candidates on things related to Israel or anti-Semitism or directly Jewish issues, there's relative consensus. So what is the average liberal Jewish voter like voting on? What are the Jewish issues in the race, or what's the Jewish lens on this race? Do you see a distinction that makes any sense? You're the New York Jewish agenda. So what, right. Is there a set of issues or a set of perspectives that you feel rally the liberal Jews together, or is it kind of all over the place?
Well, it's a great question, Jodi. When the Jewish community is broadly polled, and this has happened nationally, the issues that they, rank highly tend to be issues around healthcare and the economy. Many of the same issues that the general, voting population is concerned about. However, there are, specific community concerns here and around, and elsewhere around rising anti-Semitism. And then support for Israel. And as one of my, co-founders of the New York Jewish Agenda said, Israel is in the bloodstream of New York politics, even, in campaigns where the position being contested, is not going to have any real direct, engagement with policy, American policy towards Israel. The mayor certainly has, different responsibilities with respect to Israel and economic interactions, but there is a sense among many Jews that they want candidates who are broadly supportive of Israel, and many candidates equate support the Jewish community with their support for Israel. I went to one event for one of the candidates, and I asked a question about domestic issue, and he immediately, knowing he knows me, and he responded to me and started talking about Israel. So I think that is those are issues that factor into the calculation. And then there's the one other issue of education and the availability of secular education in yeshivas, which is an issue that has come to the brought to the fore in some discussions by particular advocates. And Jacob just reported yesterday a really interesting robocall that was funded by a political action committee, basically, as I understand, basically asking voters not to support the two candidates who had the strongest support from the Orthodox community. That's a particular voice. That's not New York Jewish Agenda's work. I think the liberal mainstream Jewish community is, not completely focused on that one issue, although there are people that feel intensely about it. One point I would make, just broadly speaking, is, to me, having been involved in politics for, my entire adult life, elections politics, they're about intensity, right? It's when elections get exciting, when elections get hot, there's an intensity. I work,
and that's what's missing here.
There's intensity, and I think ranked choice among other things, has really kind of dampened the intensity here. And I do think that that's something that people need to think about, because it's that kind of intensity that drives people over the finish line. And you play not to use a sports analogy, like there's one winner at the end of the game.
Yeah, and that momentum is part of what we respond to. And I think, there's the ranked choice. There's also the intensity of the last year, frankly, that people maybe don't need so much intensity now. I think we have another question from the audience, so let's do that. Perfect. Our Benjamin Cohen, our news director, and our behind the scenes mogul for this event wants to know who is going to win. And we'll just do, and then I actually have some early exit poll results for you to share, secret forward exit poll. So Matt, who's going to win? You're a betting man.
Yeah, my predictions have not always of late haven't been so successful. Look, based on this is not my own personal preference or vote, but based on what I've seen in terms of the
just say it, Matt. Give us a name. Adams. Jacob, who do you say? What do you say?
There won't be a fifth election, and
Naftali Bennett's going to win.
It's going to be either a man or a woman.
All right, I'm going to go out on a limb, knowing much less about this than either of you, and say I think Catherine Garcia is going to win. I think that Adams and Yang are going to really split the vote. Wiley and Adams are going to split some black votes, and people are going to rank Catherine Garcia. She's going to get a lot of first choice votes from her mainstream endorsements, and she's going to get even more second choices, and it's going to be a story about ranked choice. But we probably won't even know that for like 3 weeks, right, Jacob?
July 9th. And I was very torn, whether to say Adams or Garcia, and I would not be surprised if that was the outcome.
We will have the first indication on June 29 when the Board of Election releases all the initial in-person voting.
So I do have some, as I said, early results. The Forward decided to do our own ranked choice voting about things that matter much less than the New York mayoral election. And we polled ourselves, our staff, and some of our family and friends. And we did ranked choice on several different New York Jewish categories, or New York or Jewish categories. So, and I have the results, some early results here. We'll be publishing the full story by PJ Grisar soon. But and I'll pull you guys as well. So we ranked the matriarchs and patriarchs. I don't know, Jacob, I don't know if you voted. If you guys want to name your favorite matriarch and patriarch, or patriarch, or I'll just tell you.
Moses, yeah.
No, we're talking about just Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rachel, Rivka, and Leah, and Sarah, hands down.
Jacob the prophet. So. Yeah,
Jacob and Abraham. I personally found it very difficult to get to 5 on this. There was a tie for the favorite TV show between Mrs. Maisel and Seinfeld, the new and the classic. Matt, what's your favorite between Mrs. Maisel and Seinfeld?
Seinfeld is a classic. I love Mrs. Maisel, but Seinfeld for sure, and it's Curb Your Enthusiasm, its successor.
And then for New York movies, we actually had an unequivocal winner in the first round. The movies that were beat out included West Side Story, Annie Hall, Crossing Delancey, but the hands down winner was When Harry Met Sally. Any reactions to that? I have one more to share, but any reactions to that?
That's shocking. I think I thought In the Heights was a spectacular New York movie.
It was not on the list. I think not Jewish enough. So finally, we had our voters rank New York's Jewish mayors. We've had many, right? We had Abe Beam and Mike Bloomberg and Ed Koch, and the sleeper, who actually turned out to be the winner, Fiorello LaGuardia, also a first-round winner among our balloteers. So watch theforward.com's website to see that exciting, silly story. And Jacob's going to keep reporting throughout the count on everything we know about the mayoral election. I think you have a story going up soon about voters, right? Is that maybe it's already up? Did your story about voters this morning go? Oh, that's Harry Met Sally. Sorry, I missed that. Who would Harry and Sally vote for among this group? That's the real question. Anyone?
That's going back
to
my memory. Yeah.
All right. Last words. Well, Matt, anything else you want to add? Bring us back to serious politics, or else we'll
Right. Look, I mean, I think it's anybody's guess. My prediction was just, based on what I've seen and read, but I think it could be anything. The most exciting thing that happened this morning for me was I was standing on the corner after voting, and a guy came up to me who was in my freshman dorm in college. And I went to college on the West Coast. I hadn't seen him since probably my freshman year, and he recognized me, which was pretty amazing.
Democracy is great. Civic engagement is so great.
Yes.
I mean, I think actually what may be the worst part, I mean, after seeing the historic turnout last fall, I feel like we are going to end up with some really low numbers in this election, and that will be depressing. But Jacob, what's your last word for us today?
I think twofold. One, if Adams wins, we'll probably see sort of a continuation of the Mike Bloomberg, de Blasio administration, where the mayor dominated sort of the policy of the city. Versus if Catherine Garcia, Andrew Yang, Maya Wiley wins, we'll sort of see that partnership, that team, something fresh, something new. And that's what we should be looking at. Will the politics sort of continue as we know New York City politics is, or will we sort of see something fresh?
And Jacob will continue to watch that for us and analyze it for us at forward.com all the time. He is the premier Jewish political reporter in the country, and we're really lucky to have him. Thanks for being with us, Jacob. I know you're busy today. And thanks, Matt, for taking the time to join us. We've really enjoyed being with you.
This was great.
And we have lots more to look at in the next few weeks during the counting. And then, of course, all the way till November and afterwards when we have a new mayor. So please stay with us. We'll be back on Facebook Live and otherwise. So have a great election day, everyone.
Everyone vote. Vote before 9 p.m. Bye-bye.